Long before cities and kings, before time itself had a name, there was only fear, the fear of gods. They ruled the sky, the sea, the flame. Humans were shadows beneath their light, until one boy stood against the storm. His name was Kale. He caught lightning in his hand, and the heavens trembled. From that spark, a fire spread, across villages, across hearts. Men and women rose, not as servants, but as equals. They fought the gods in the sky itself, and the world was never the same again. This is not the story of how gods fell, but how humans learned to rise. Long ago, before cities rose and machines ruled the earth, the world was divided between gods and humans. The gods lived high above in the celestial realm, surrounded by golden towers and endless clouds of fire and light, and they looked down upon humans as fragile creatures meant only to obey. They sent rain and thunder when they pleased, made the sun rise or vanish, and demanded worship for every breath humans took. People built temples on every hill, burned food as offerings, and bowed every morning, whispering the names of their rulers in the sky. For centuries, this balance of fear continued, until the day the gods went too far. It began in the small mountain village of Arden, where the rivers dried without reason, and the crops burned even in spring. The priests said the god of storms, Zephon, had demanded a sacrifice, one life from every family. The people wept, but they obeyed, until one boy refused. His name was Kyle, son of a farmer, born with eyes that glowed faintly silver at night, a sign that made the priests whisper he was cursed or chosen. No one knew which. When Zephon's lightning came to take the first child, Kale stood in its path. He shouted to the sky, "No more! We will not kneel!" The lightning struck him, but he did not burn. Instead, it spread across his skin like light through glass, and for the first time, a human touched the power of the divine and lived. The villagers fell silent. The storm stopped, and even the clouds above seemed to hesitate. That moment was the spark that would change everything. The next morning, Zephon descended in fury, his form like burning stone, his voice shaking the mountain. "You dare to defy me!" he roared. But Kyle, standing barefoot in the ashes, simply said, "You made us weak, but you forgot. Weakness learns." And with those words, he threw the lightning back. The mountain split in two. For the first time in history, a god bled. When the other gods heard what had happened, they were enraged. The sky god Orin, ruler of all, ordered the destruction of Arden. Flames rained from above, and half the world trembled under divine wrath. But what the gods didn't expect was that humanity had already changed. The lightning that Kale caught that night had spread through him like fire through roots. Wherever he walked, people began to feel power stir inside them, sparks of energy, whispers of courage, echoes of something ancient buried deep in human blood. Soon others began to rise. Mira, a healer who could call rivers from dry ground. Tarin, a blacksmith whose hammer could bend sunlight. And Lisa, a blind woman who could hear the thoughts of stars. Together they found Kale and swore to follow him, calling themselves the Free Ones. They traveled from village to village, teaching people that the gods were not untouchable, that power could live in mortal hands. The gods, in their pride, laughed at first. "They are ants with fire," they said. But when Kale and his companions raised their hands to the sky and cracked the clouds themselves, laughter turned to fear. The war between gods and humans had begun. For years, the heavens rained storms and fire, while the earth rose to fight back with metal and will. Cities turned to stone and forests to ash, and in the middle of it all, Kale grew stronger. Some said he was not human anymore. Some said he was becoming something else entirely. Yet through every battle, every wound, he repeated the same words. "We fight not to rule the gods, but to stop being ruled." The war began as survival, but it became something greater, a rebellion for the right to exist without fear. And though the gods commanded the skies, humans now commanded hope. By the 10th year, even the smallest child could whisper the name Kale and feel a spark rise in their chest. The gods gathered in their golden halls and looked down at a world no longer bowing. Orin the Sky Lord rose and said, "We must end this. If humans wish to be gods, then let them die like gods." And with that, He sent his armies, divine beasts, angels of flame, shadows of endless night, to destroy what remained of mankind. But far below, Kael looked at his people and smiled. "They think we are still mortals," he said. "They do not see that we have become the storm itself." That night, the sky burned with the first true war between heaven and earth. And for the first time since creation, the gods knew fear. The war between humans and gods began with light. Not the warm light of dawn, but the burning kind that blinds the eyes and turns stone to ash. For 3 days and nights, the sky above the mountains of Arden was filled with thunder and flame. The gods struck first. Zephon, the storm god, gathered every cloud in the world and twisted them into a black sea that covered the sun. Bolts of white fire rained down, tearing valleys open. Mountains cracked, rivers boiled, and the air itself screamed. People hid in caves, clutching children, thinking the world would end that night. But in the heart of the storm, Kael stood on a cliff, his silver eyes glowing brighter than the lightning around him. "If the gods control the sky," he said, "then we will learn to fly." Around him, his closest companions, Mira, Taran, and Lisa, prepared for the impossible. Mira raised her hands and whispered to the wind. The air calmed for a heartbeat. Taran struck his hammer against the ground, sending sparks flying into the storm, each one turning into a small floating ember of light. Lisa stood silently, her blind eyes white, listening to the voice of thunder itself. "They are coming," she said. The first god to descend was Zephon, wrapped in lightning and rage. His body was made of clouds and molten silver, his eyes burning suns. "You should have stayed on your knees, mortal," he thundered. Kael smiled faintly. "You should have stayed in your heaven," Zephon roared, and lightning poured from his hands like waterfalls of fire. But Kael raised both arms, and the bolts bent around him, not striking but spinning in a circle, forming a shining ring. The air cracked. He absorbed the power once again. When the light cleared, Kael was gone. Zephon looked around, confused, and that was when a voice whispered behind him, "Your storm belongs to us now." Kael appeared in the sky itself, riding a current of his own creation. He spread his arms, and the lightning obeyed. The humans below looked up and saw for the first time a man standing in the clouds, glowing brighter than the gods. It was the beginning of the fire in the sky. From that moment, humans no longer fought on the ground, they learned to rise. Mira called rivers upward, turning them into walls of steam that swallowed the divine fire. Taran forged wings of burning metal, and hundreds of warriors soared above the smoke. Lysa's voice guided them. Though she could not see, she heard every shift in the wind, every whisper of the gods' thoughts. "Left," she would say, and whole squadrons would turn as one. "Now," she would whisper, and arrows made of light would strike unseen targets. The gods were furious. They summoned beasts of their own, fiery eagles with wings like blades, serpents of thunder that swallowed mountains. For every human who rose, a god sent 10 monsters. Yet the humans fought back harder than the heavens had ever seen. They had something the gods did not. They had loss, memory, and love. Every fallen soldier gave their strength to another. Every cry became a spark that rose into the sky. The gods had power, but humans had purpose. The greatest clash came on the 7th day of battle. Zephon himself descended again, leading an army of storms, his rage shaking the world. "You cannot win," he cried. "We are eternal." Kael, standing on the highest peak, answered, "Then we will become eternity." He raised his hands, and the clouds obeyed. For the first time, a storm born from mortal will rose to face a god. Lightning and fire collided, turning the whole sky white. The shockwave reached even the celestial realm. From his golden throne, Orin, the Sky Lord, watched silently. Around him sat the other gods, silent, tense, uncertain. "They are breaking the order," one said. "They are stealing our light," said another. But Orin only stood, his face carved in stone. "They are remembering who they were," he said quietly. The gods looked confused. "What do you mean?" Orin turned to the heavens below and whispered, "Before we were gods, we were something else too." But his words were lost in thunder. On the battlefield, Kael and Zephon clashed one final time. Each strike shook the sky. Each step burned clouds to ash. When Zephon raised his lightning spear for the last blow, Kale caught it bare-handed, his skin glowing white-hot. "You made us afraid of fire," Kale said, "but fear is what made us stronger." And he drove the lightning back into Zephon's heart. The storm god screamed, the sound breaking the air. Then with a burst of light he fell, not as a god, but as a star falling to earth. The storm vanished. The sky cleared. For the first time in centuries, sunlight touched the mountains of Arden. Humans looked up and saw no fire, no clouds, only peace. But it was not victory yet. As the people cheered, Kale knelt beside the fallen god's ashes and whispered, "This is only the beginning." Far above, in the celestial realm, Orin clenched his golden staff. His eyes burned with pride and sorrow. "He is closer than I thought," he said to himself. "The boy carries something of us. Shall we destroy him?" asked the goddess of light. Orin shook his head. "No, if we destroy him, we destroy our reflection." Then he turned to the others and said, "Let him come. The gates of heaven will open soon, and if humans wish to climb, let them try." Back on Earth, Kale looked at his people, tired, wounded, but alive. He raised his sword of lightning to the sky and said, "We have won one sky. Now we take back the rest." The war was far from over. But for the first time in history, the fire in the sky belonged not to the gods, but to humans. After the storm cleared and Zephon fell, the world was never the same. For the first time in memory, humans stood tall without fear. They had faced lightning, thunder, and flame, and survived. The ashes of a god lay on the mountain of Arden, and every wind that blew carried the whisper of Kale's name. Villages rebuilt, rivers flowed again, and people began to speak a dangerous word, freedom. But peace was short. The gods, humiliated by Zephon's fall, gathered in their shining palace above the clouds, the celestial citadel, a fortress made of light and divine metal. At its center sat Orin, lord of the sky, silent and thoughtful. Around him, the other gods shouted in anger. "They murdered one of us," cried the goddess of the sun. "They break the order we built," shouted the god of war. "They are only dust, yet they challenge eternity," said another. But Orin only looked down at the world below and said, "They have found what we lost, the will to rise." The gods stared at him, confused and furious. "Then you will not punish them?" Orin's eyes burned gold. "I will," he said softly, but not with anger, with truth. He stood and raised his staff toward the horizon. The clouds opened, revealing the earth below, green, wounded, but shining with new fire. "Let them come," he whispered. "If humans wish to take heaven, they must climb it with their own hands." That night, Kale stood on the ruins of Zephon's temple, staring at the stars. "He is waiting," Lisa said beside him. "I can hear him calling the wind itself." Kyle nodded. "Then we answer." The next morning, the world woke to see something no one had ever seen before, a bridge of light stretching from the highest mountain to the sky, like a golden road connecting heaven and earth. It was Orin's challenge. The gods called it the Path of Reckoning. Anyone who dared to climb it would face every trial of the divine. Kale saw it not as a trap, but as a door. "Heaven was built to look down on us," he said. "Now we climb and look them in the eye." So began the march of mortals. Thousands of men and women from every land walking toward the mountain. Some carried swords, some carried torches, and some carried nothing but hope. Mira, Taryn, and Lisa walked beside Kale. "If we reach their realm," Mira asked, "what will we find?" Kyle looked up at the shining bridge. "The truth," he said. The climb took 7 days. On the first day, they crossed winds so strong they could lift a man off the ground. Taryn struck his hammer into the path, anchoring them. "The gods test our breath," he said. On the second day, fire rained from the sky. Mira lifted her hands, turning each flame into petals of light. "They test our fear." On the third day, whispers filled the air, voices of dead loved ones begging them to stop. Lisa covered her ears and said, "They test our hearts." By the 6th day, only a few hundred remained. Some turned back, others fell, but those who stayed had eyes like stars, fierce and unbroken. On the seventh day, they reached the gates of heaven. The gates were enormous, taller than mountains, carved from light itself. Two giant statues guarded them, angels made of silver stone, their eyes weeping fire. Kale walked forward, sword of lightning in hand. "We come as equals," he said. The angels raised their blades, their voices booming like thunder. "Mortals do not enter here." Kyle lifted his sword. "Then we change that law." The battle that followed was like no war before. The gates of heaven shook as mortals fought angels, lightning clashing with flame. Taran's hammer shattered one guardian's wing. Mira healed hundreds with one breath. Lysa whispered paths through the smoke, guiding every fighter. Kale faced both angels at once, moving like the storm itself. His blade flashed white, and when it struck, even the light screamed. The gates cracked open. Beyond them stretched the celestial realm, endless halls of gold, cities floating in clouds, rivers of pure light. But instead of wonder, the humans saw sorrow. The gods were not celebrating. They were kneeling in silence beside Zephin's empty throne. Orin stood before them, tall and calm, his face unreadable. "So," he said softly, "you made it." Kale stepped forward, every wound on his body glowing faintly. "We did not come to destroy you," he said. "We came to end fear." Orin nodded. "You seek freedom. But freedom has a cost." He raised his hand and the heavens trembled. The floor split apart, revealing the heart of creation, a swirling storm of power. "Every world needs order. Every light needs shadow. You remove us and chaos will eat you alive." Kale's voice was steady. "Then we will build our own order." The other gods gasped, but Orin smiled sadly. "You sound like us once." For a long moment, neither moved. Then Orin's eyes flared gold, and he said, "Very well, child of dust. Let us see if you can hold the sky." He lifted his staff, and lightning filled the air. The humans raised their weapons, the gods their storms. Heaven itself began to fall. The clash shook creation. Stars blinked out. Rivers of light turned red. Angels wept fire. Humans answered with steel. In that chaos, Kale and Orin met at the center of the storm, God and man, thunder and breath. "If you win," Orin said, "you will become what you hate." Kale answered, "If we stop, we remain what you made." They struck, and the sound of it split the heavens in two. When the light faded, the golden city was breaking apart. The gates fell. The bridge of light began to crumble. The war had reached its heart, and neither side would ever be the same. The golden city was dying. Towers that had stood for 1,000 years crumbled like dust, and rivers of light spilled across the sky like broken glass. The air itself burned, filled with the cries of angels and mortals locked in battle. The gods had never known fear until that day, and humans had never known strength like this. Kyle stood at the heart of the celestial realm, his sword glowing like captured lightning, his body covered in wounds that shone faintly with light instead of blood. Around him lay the ruins of the gods' home, once perfect, now cracked and bleeding gold. Mira knelt beside him, her hands trembling as she tried to heal what she could. "You can't fight him like this," she said, her voice breaking. "You'll die," Kyle smiled weakly. "If dying ends the chains, then I die free." Taran looked at the sky where the light still flared and said, "He's waiting for you." And he was. Orin, Lord of the Sky, stood on his final throne, a mountain of pure light floating above the ruined city. He was calm, too calm, his golden armor cracked but his eyes still fierce. Lightning circled around him like wings. When Kale climbed the shining steps toward him, the ground trembled with every step. "So," Orin said softly, "the boy of dust found his way to heaven." Kale's voice was tired but steady. "I didn't come to rule, Orin. I came to end your rule." The god smiled. "You think you freed them, but you only gave them another kind of worship. They chant your name now instead of ours." Kyle's hands tightened on his sword. "They don't need me forever. They only need to remember they can stand." Orin lifted his staff, its end glowing like a newborn sun. "Then stand against this." He struck and the sky exploded. The blast hit Kale with the power of creation itself, wind, fire, and lightning in one endless wave. He fell to his knees, arms shaking, teeth clenched, but he didn't fall. His sword caught the storm, bending the light, and for a second, Kale's body shone brighter than Oren's own. "You gave us pain," Kale said, pushing forward. "Pain taught us power." He swung, and lightning met lightning. The sound tore through heaven. Gods and angels far away stopped fighting to watch. The boy of dust stood against the god of storms, and neither would yield. Oren struck again, faster this time. Each blow cracked the air, each flash brighter than the last. "You are a spark," he shouted. "And sparks die," Kale's voice came back like thunder. "Then let this spark burn the sky." He drove his blade forward, cutting through the storm. The energy burst outward, shattering the throne beneath Oren's feet. The god fell to one knee, eyes wide, light pouring from the cracks in his armor. For the first time, Oren bled. Not gold, but pure white light. "You are not meant to have this power," Oren whispered. Kale, panting, said, "Maybe it was always ours." The god rose again, slower now, holding his staff like a spear. "You don't understand. If you kill me, the balance breaks. The sun will die, the seas will turn to dust. Creation needs someone to hold it." Kyle looked at him, at the ancient fire in his eyes, at the exhaustion of a being who had ruled too long. "Then I will hold it," he said simply. Oren stared for a moment, then laughed, not cruelly, but sadly. "You think you can carry eternity? It will tear you apart." Kale's silver eyes glowed brighter. "Then let it tear me. As long as my people live free." The two charged one final time, God and man, creation and defiance. Their clash lit the sky for miles. Mountains cracked, stars dimmed, the entire celestial realm shook. Mira and the others watched from below as the sky turned white, then gold, then pure silence. When the light faded, Oren was on one knee, his staff broken. Kale stood before him, his sword buried deep in the throne of light. The air was still. The gods, watching from the ruins, bowed their heads, not in worship, but in grief and respect. Oren looked up at Kale, his voice barely a whisper. "You've done what no mortal ever could. The throne is yours now." Kyle shook his head slowly. "No one should sit on it." He pulled his sword free, and the golden throne cracked. Light spilled out like a river, spreading across the sky. "Then who will hold the world?" Oren asked, his form already fading into light. Kale looked at his friends far below. Mira, Taryn, Lisa, and the thousands of people watching from the broken bridge. "We will," he said. "All of us." Oren smiled faintly, like dawn after endless night. "Then perhaps you have already won." His body dissolved into 1,000 sparks that drifted upward, joining the stars. The throne shattered. The power of the gods poured into the air, and for a moment, the sky looked like fire and rain mixed together. Creation unbound. Kyle felt the energy rush through him, burning but beautiful. He could feel every heartbeat on earth, every whisper of wind, every star breathing. "It's too much," Mira shouted from below. Kale looked down and smiled. "No, it's just finally equal." Then he raised his sword one last time, and the light burst outward, wrapping the world in gold. The heavens fell quiet. The gods were gone. The sky was free. But Kale's body was gone too. No ashes, no shadow, only light fading into the air. The people below wept and cheered at once. The war was over. The throne was empty. And for the first time in all of history, the sky belonged to humans. When the last light faded and the echoes of thunder were gone, a silence fell over the world, the kind of silence that only comes after something too great to understand. The heavens were empty now. The golden halls had turned to dust, and the voices of the gods were gone from the wind. For a long time, no one spoke. Humans stood under a sky that was finally theirs, but they did not know what to do with it. There was peace, yes, but it was heavy, like a crown too large for the head that wears it. The first sunrise after the war was unlike any before. The light came not from a god's command, but from the earth itself. It was softer, warmer, as if the world was breathing again. People came out of their shelters and caves, their eyes full of disbelief. "We're alive," someone whispered. The gods are gone! For some, that meant freedom. For others, it meant fear. Without the gods, who would bring rain? Who would heal the sick or guard the dead? Kale's name became both prayer and warning. In every village, people built fires and told stories of the boy who fought the sky. Some called him savior. Others called him thief, the one who stole the light from heaven. Mira, Taryn, and Lisa wandered the earth, searching for what remained of their friend. They found only traces, a spark of silver in the river's surface, a faint whisper when the wind blew through trees, the feeling of warmth when lightning flashed far away. "He's still here," Mira said softly. "Not as flesh, but as light," Taryn nodded. "He gave us his storm." And truly the world had changed. The old powers did not vanish, they spread. Farmers could call gentle rain with a song. Children could make sparks in their hands. Healers could touch wounds and feel warmth grow beneath their palms. The divine was no longer above. It had become part of everything. This new time was called the Age of Dawn. For a while it was beautiful. Cities rose from ruins. Rivers flowed again. The sky was clear, endless, free. People learned to live without temples and priests. But as generations passed, something subtle began to shift. The same power that once gave hope also awakened pride. "If Kale could touch the sky," said one ruler, "then I can hold it." Small kingdoms began to fight. People forgot why Kale had fought at all. They used lightning not to light their homes, but to burn their enemies. Mira, growing older, watched with sorrow. "We have become what we defeated," she said one night to Lisa. "The gods fell, and we took their place." Lisa, her white eyes soft in the firelight, answered quietly, "Maybe this is the real test, not to win, but to stay human after winning." In the centuries that followed, the story of Kale became legend. Statues were built, then forgotten, then buried under dust. Children were told of the boy who rose to heaven, but few believed he was ever real. Only those who carried his power in their blood still felt the truth. When storms came, they heard his voice in the thunder. When dawn broke, they saw his light in the sky. One day, long after the wars had ended, a child was born in the valley of Arden. Her name was Eris, and when she cried for the first time, lightning flashed across a clear sky. The elders called it a blessing. Mira, now old and quiet, smiled faintly and whispered, "No, it's a reminder." Eris grew fast, curious and fearless. She could call wind with her laughter and make flames dance on her palms. She asked questions no one wanted to answer. Where did the gods go? What happens if they return? One evening, as the sun sank behind the mountains, she found a strange object buried in the soil, a piece of golden metal shaped like a broken crown. When she touched it, a voice echoed faintly in her mind, "If you hold the sky, hold it gently." Eris looked up. The clouds were turning red, glowing softly. She didn't understand yet, but she felt something stir, a memory older than herself. The next morning, she left her home, walking toward the mountains where Kale's final light had once fallen. No one stopped her. No one knew what she was looking for. Mira, lying in her last days, felt a sudden gust of wind in her room and smiled. "So it begins again," she whispered. Far above in the quiet sky, the light flickered, almost like a heartbeat. The Age of Dawn was not the end. It was the start of something new. Not a war between gods and men, but a test between power and heart. For humans had learned to fight the gods, but now they had to learn how not to become them. As Eris climbed higher into the clouds, lightning flashed in her eyes. Somewhere in that light, far beyond time, Kale's voice whispered one last promise. The sky was never ours to keep. It was ours to protect. And so the world turned again, free, fragile, and full of new storms waiting to be born. Centuries had passed since Kale vanished into light, and his name had become little more than a myth whispered by the old. The sky was now quiet, too quiet. People ruled without fear of gods, but they had also forgotten wonder. Palaces replaced temples, kings replaced priests, and lightning was no longer a gift of nature, but a weapon in the hands of men. In the city of Arden rebuilt, towers of white stone stretched into the clouds as if trying to reach heaven again. But beneath all the glory, the world had begun to crack. Crops failed. Rivers dried. The sun dimmed earlier each day. The air, once alive with Kale's warmth, felt colder now. The people of Arden blamed one another, never thinking to look up. Only one person still listened to the wind, a young woman named Eris. She had grown strong, curious, and restless, her eyes glowing faintly silver when storms gathered. She was Kale's distant descendant, though no one knew it. Every night she dreamed of voices calling from the clouds, and every morning she woke with lightning on her fingertips. One night, unable to sleep, she climbed to the top of the city's highest tower and looked at the stars. "If the gods are gone," she whispered, "then why do I still hear them?" The wind answered softly, not with words but with a sound like breathing. The next morning, strange things began to happen. Statues that had stood silent for hundreds of years began to crack. In distant lands, people reported hearing whispers from old temples buried under sand. Fishermen saw shapes moving in the mist, too big, too bright to be human. At first, people thought it was madness. Then the earth shook. In the ruins of the old celestial citadel, the broken home of the gods, something was waking. Far below the clouds, Eris dreamed again. In her dream, she saw Kale standing in golden light, his eyes calm and sad. "You carried our storm too far," he said. "The sky remembers." "What does it mean?" Eris asked. But before he could answer, shadows rose behind him, tall, familiar figures made of light and smoke. Their voices were cold, echoing across her mind. "You took what was ours," they hissed. "Now we take what is left." Eris woke with a scream. The room around her glowed faintly as lightning ran across the walls. "They're coming back," she whispered. That day, she told the Council of Arden what she had seen. The rulers laughed. "The gods are gone," they said. Dreams are not warnings. But that night, thunder rolled across a cloudless sky. A river of light split the heavens open, and from it descended the forgotten ones, gods too old and bitter for Kale's mercy to have erased. They were not like Orin or Zephon, full of pride and command. These were creatures born from what the gods had thrown away, hunger, fear, and endless desire. They called themselves remnants. The first appeared over the desert city of Marin, a god made of shadow and flame, who called himself Vorath, the devourer of hope. His voice turned day into night. The people knelt at once, remembering fear too late. In the north, another rose, Solara, goddess of silence, who could turn whole cities to ash with a sigh. One by one, the forgotten gods returned, feeding not on worship, but on the chaos humans had created. For every lie spoken by a ruler, for every war fought out of greed, a remnant grew stronger. They are our reflection, Eris realized, born from what we've become. When the first city fell, she gathered those who still believed in Kale's story, healers, builders, soldiers, and wanderers who remembered the sky's light. "We must fight again," she said, "not against heaven this time, but against ourselves." They called themselves the Keepers of Dawn. Armed with lightning forged from Kale's old energy and guided by Eris's visions, they traveled across the broken lands, freeing cities enslaved by the remnant's fear. But each victory came at a cost. The more Eris used her power, the less human she felt. Her eyes glowed brighter each night. Her heartbeat matched the thunder. Mira's old words echoed in her mind. Maybe the test is to stay human after winning. The world burned again, but differently now. Not in rebellion, but in penance. The skies above turned red as if remembering the old war. And one night, as Eris stood on the ruins of an ancient temple, she saw it, a faint shimmer in the clouds, like a door of light opening for the first time in centuries. "You're not alone," a voice whispered. Kale's voice. The air trembled. "The sky still listens," he said, "but it will not forgive what was forgotten." Eris raised her hands. "Then teach me how to fix it." Kale's voice was soft, fading like wind. "You cannot destroy them. They are part of you. To win, you must remember why we fought, not to rule, but to be free." As the light faded, the remnants appeared on the horizon, marching like shadows with wings. Eris looked at the storm gathering over the mountains. "Then freedom will fight again," she whispered. Lightning flared around her, brighter than Kale's had ever been. The Second War was about to begin. Not between gods and humans, but between memory and power. The forgotten gods roared across the sky, their voices shaking the world. But this time, humanity did not kneel. They had faced the heavens once, and once was enough to know how to rise. The world stood on the edge again. The sky was torn in half, one side burning red with the wrath of the forgotten gods, the other glowing blue with the light of the humans who refused to kneel. The old cities of Arden were now battlefields, rivers of fire crossing streets once full of laughter. Above them, Eris stood on a broken tower, lightning flowing around her like wings. She had grown into something neither mortal nor god, her body human, her soul touched by the storm. "They are coming," whispered her second-in-command, a young soldier named Rin. Eris nodded, eyes fixed on the horizon. The remnants approached like a storm, Vorath, the devourer of hope, and Solara, the goddess of silence, leading an army of twisted shadows. "They feed on fear," Eris said softly. "Then we give them courage." Behind her, thousands of humans waited, farmers, builders, healers, and warriors, the last of the keepers of dawn. They carried no gold, no armor of gods, only light forged from their own will. The ground shook as the remnants drew near. Their voices echoed like thunder through every heart. "You cannot kill us," Vorath roared. "We are what you are. Your greed, your pride, your endless hunger for more." Eris lifted her hands, and the air around her sparked. "Then we will not kill you," she said. "We will forgive you." The shadows hesitated, confused. "Forgive?" hissed Solara. "You cannot forgive what you are." Eris's voice rose, calm but fierce. "We forgot the meaning of power. We took Kale's fire and turned it into greed. We forgot that light was never meant to rule, only to guide." She spread her hands, and lightning burst from her palms. But it didn't strike the remnants. It spread into the sky, creating a vast circle of glowing energy that surrounded the battlefield. "This world was built from both creation and chaos," she said. "So let them live together again, not as masters and servants, but as one." The remnants screamed, the sound breaking the clouds. They tried to strike her, but every bolt of darkness dissolved before touching her light. Rin shouted over the storm, "She's drawing them in!" Mira's old prophecy whispered through the wind. "To win, you must stay human after winning." Eris felt it deep in her heart. The lightning that filled her veins now felt heavier, alive. She stepped forward and called to the shadows, "Come back to us." One by one, the remnants stopped fighting. Their monstrous forms began to flicker. Vorath, towering above her, lowered his burning head. "You would take us back?" he asked, his voice breaking. "You were never gone," Eris said. "You were the part of us we refused to face." She reached out her hand, and when she touched him, the fire around him turned gold. Solara fell to her knees, her face soft for the first time in eternity. "Then let there be silence no more," she whispered. Her form turned into light and vanished into the wind. The others followed, the remnants dissolving into dust that became starlight, their voices fading into song. When it was done, only Eris remained standing in the center of the glowing circle, the sky calm for the first time in centuries. The storm was over, but the power in her body was too great. Her light was beginning to fade. Rin ran toward her, shouting, "Eris, you did it! You ended them!" She smiled weakly. "No," she said. "We remembered them." Her skin began to glow brighter, her body breaking into threads of light. "The world will need balance again. Gods, humans, and everything between. But not rulers, guardians." "Don't go," Rin cried, grabbing her hand. "Who will lead us?" Eris looked up at the sky. "No one must lead. That's the lesson Kale left us." Lightning flared one last time, brighter than the sun, and Eris rose into the air. "If you ever forget," she whispered, "look to the dawn." Then she was gone, not destroyed, but scattered, her light spreading across the world like morning. The circle of energy collapsed gently into the earth, and a new sun rose, softer, kinder, golden. The people fell to their knees, not in worship, but in peace. They had fought the gods twice and won both times, not through hate, but through memory. Years passed. The scars of war healed. Forests grew again where fire once burned. Children played under skies that no longer feared thunder. And every dawn, when the first light touched the world, people said they could see her, a faint figure made of lightning and peace, watching quietly from the clouds. Rin became an old man, a storyteller. He would sit under the mango tree in the center of Arden and tell children how humans once fought the gods, and won not by power, but by forgiveness. "The sky is ours now?" one child always asked. Rin smiled and shook his head. "No," he said. "The sky belongs to everyone." In his last years, Rin dreamed of Kale and Eris standing together in light, watching the world below. Kyle smiled and said, "They learned." Eris nodded, her voice like wind. They finally did. And when Rin took his last breath, the dawn outside his window shone brighter than ever before, a new beginning for a world that had once dared to rise against heaven and found peace instead of pride. That day was remembered forever as the second dawn, when gods and humans no longer stood apart, and the sky, at last, belonged to all. The war ended, but not the lesson. Power can build, or it can burn. Kale fought to free us, and we forgot what freedom means. I learned it again, not by fighting gods, but by forgiving them. The sky does not belong to rulers. It belongs to everyone who dares to dream beneath it. So when the dawn comes, and the first light touches your face, remember us. Remember the ones who fought the gods, and won not through power, but through heart.